All right, we're live. So we'll just give it a couple of seconds for the rest of the folks to join in. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you in terms of where you're joining from, what your role is. So we have with us Matt. Vikash is on the backstage, and he'll be coordinating the chat for us. So for everybody who's already joined, welcome to Masters of Revenue Heroes Virtual Summit, where we have conversations with revenue leaders with different experiences to learn from them and get shortcuts to help us unlock those growth levers and learn from their experiences in terms of what's worked and what hasn't, right? So we have today, so I'm Chara, I'm a co-founder here, and we have today with us Matt. And Matt is the CEO and founder of Next Stage Consulting. And Matt brings the unique perspective of having balanced enterprise sales with a PLG motion in the same org. And Matt, I'd love to hear from you about your PLG journey with Sprig, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm more than happy to share that, and also hi to everybody who's joining us here. So, like Chara said, I'm Matt. I'm joining from Bethesda, Maryland, which is just outside Washington D.C. So it's a nice, sunny, summery, starting to get very warm over here spot. But I'd love to hear in the chat where everybody's joining us from, where you're at, what kind of role you're in. Since that just helps us tailor what we're talking about. And yeah, I'm so glad to be here with Revenue Hero. Definitely love all of the work that I do with Revenue Hero, with my company and with my clients, helping them get their RevOps systems set up and optimized. And yeah, I'd love to share about my journey at Sprig. So I joined Sprig in late 2020. And I stayed for 2.5 years. I left a little over a year ago to found Next Stage Consulting. And when I joined Sprig, it was the week we first launched our product publicly. And that also meant the week that we launched PLG and a public, non-stealth mode enterprise sales motion for the first time. So definitely quite an interesting week to join as a go-to-market ops leader and start, building out marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops, all at the same time during that journey. So Sprig is a company that provides product tooling that enables companies to get feedback on all different aspects of their product in really granular and actionable ways. So it's a great product for a PLG motion because there is a low lift weight of value with really intro surveys. And then there's incredibly complicated and large scale ways to use the product that involve much larger enterprise deals. So with Sprig, we originally launched a free sign-up motion that fortunately we were able to drive a lot of marketing forward, drove a lot of free signups, and it was not a trial. So with Sprig, from the beginning through to today, you can have a free forever account. And then there is a self-serve way to upgrade that account to pay for a credit card, low value, or not low value, but low cost plan. And then there's a way to say, talk to sales, raise your hand and make that an enterprise plan. And what we saw on the Sprig journey, we started with everybody's going to come in through the inbound motion. Everybody's going to onboard and upgrade on their own. And we really pushed that, pure PLG motion with this idea that, the right users would just sign up and upgrade themselves until they raised their hand for a demo, and then sales would sell them. And what we found was that it was a much more complex journey than that. And we'll definitely get into that as we go through the webinar. But we certainly learned a lot about blending those two processes successfully.
Yeah, I think who doesn't want that, right? Like open up free signups, a free trial, all your ICPs just pour in, they figure out when they want to buy, and they just talk to sales, right? That's the dream. Right? So this topic is really exciting for me, specifically because Revenue Hero has had a brief brush with product-led growth. That's a story for another day. But before its current version, we were quite involved in product-led growth, which is why I'm really excited to talk about what comes next, right? But before we get into the meat of it, Matt, we always love to start this with something fun. This question is biased based on my recent experience, but I would love to hear from you. What is one of the most interesting things you've read or watched recently, which you didn't expect to enjoy, but ended up just getting your mind blown off of?
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. So I read a lot of history and a lot of biographies, and I have this bias in my head, of just like, oh, there's no way this is going to be interesting, something like that. And then of course I get into it and I'm totally captivated and it's incredibly interesting. And the one I've been reading right now is Leviathan: The History of Whaling in America. And like, I mean, one, as some people know, whaling is the original venture capital industry, where deckhands on these whaling boats had a stake in the proceeds of the journey, which was a very new business concept. And it's part of why the American whaling industry was so successful relative to some other global powers that were much bigger than the U.S. At that time. And yes, James, New Bedford very much is mentioned. And in fact, it was actually, I think it was called Dartmouth during part of that time and got renamed New Bedford as part of this giant whaling development. So anyway, terrific business history, geopolitical history, really, really great summer read if you don't mind reading about thousands of whales being slaughtered in the process. But a really, really great book. And I am not from the Cape, but I am actually just getting back. My partner and I go to Provincetown every year. This year we were in Barnstable and Hyannis, and then went to Martha's Vineyard. So yes, big Cape fan, and totally add me on LinkedIn. We can chat.
That's awesome. So just taking down the name of that book and then realizing that it's recorded. But thanks for that. I wish mine was as interesting, but what I stumbled upon from a WhatsApp group conversation was something called Excel Championships. And obviously, when you hear that, it's just hard not to click on the link, right? So what Excel Championship is, championships is a esports style, Excel competition where people are given like a complex Excel problem to solve, and they just go gung-ho on it. And it's like watching like a Dota 2 or a Counter-Strike, only instead of gaming, they're actually solving formulas and problems on Excel. And it just ended up being a rabbit hole. It has like what keystrokes are happening on their keyboard, and it just arcs together with amazing commentary and comparing. And that's my rabbit hole for what I didn't think I'd enjoy, but then just spent so many hours on.
That sounds very addictive. It sounds like something I honestly should not start looking into, because I could definitely, I enjoy spending some time in Excel.
Yeah, and given our audience, we have a good mix of RevOps, general GTM folks, and sales ops. I'm pretty sure I probably started, quite a bit of rabbit holes today. So, given that that's the mix, I think our first topic would be very relevant for a lot of the folks on the call, right? So, Matt, you started talking about Sprig and your PLG and enterprise sales journey. So, I'd love to start there. When there's an org that has a thriving PLG motion, right, or the other way around, depending on which one you think is most feasible, how do you think about layering on an enterprise sales motion? Where would you start, and what do you think are some early signs that it's working, right? And what was your journey with Sprig on those lines?
Yeah, great question. So with Sprig, we started with, we were selling some enterprise deals mostly through our network, like any early stage company. And separately, we had this just totally taking off PLG motion. So we had, so many signups, people were onboarding, they were activating, and we were incredibly focused on that, and we had really made an assumption that if we succeeded at PLG, the enterprise sales would follow. And one thing that we did not think about is in virtually every industry, and certainly in tech, there are many, many more tiny firms than there are large firms, right? There are a gazillion solo founders or early stage startups, and there's only so many Dropboxes and Salesforces and Netflixes and so on, right? So there's, you've got tons of tiny companies, and then it kind of drops off to like, the few big hitter whales that are going to be signing your big enterprise contracts. And what that meant was when we were spending all this time optimizing for signing up for our free product, optimizing for upgrading and onboarding and so on, we were optimizing based on numbers, which is very natural in what everybody does. But the problem was the numbers were extremely biased towards small companies, solo founders, extremely early stage companies that were not going to be buying the six-figure deals that we were trying to sell and that we were selling for some of our enterprise deals. So we were really optimizing on one end and making our money on another end. And we were essentially optimizing away from what was going to be making us money. So that was something we learned pretty early on. And what we found, the flip side of that was, we had really optimized for this small company use case of getting value really quickly in the free product, which is what you should do with a product-led growth motion. But the problem is if you're a big company, if you're, a product manager at, name a large tech company, and you are going to start with a new tool, you have to get security approvals, you have to get legal approvals, you've got to go get a different engineering team to install the first integration. It's got to go through someone else. It's got to get communicated internally. And there's no way you're activating as an individual. So these PLG freemium plans, even if they're absolutely great for getting activation and engagement and signups, the big enterprise buyers that you may be targeting in an enterprise sales motion, even if they sign up, it might be virtually impossible for them to activate on their own. And what we ended up realizing was the minute that somebody in that enterprise ICP big deal group signs up, even if they're signing up for a PLG program where they expect to speak to nobody, we absolutely have to have somebody swoop in, route that lead to an SDR or an AE and ensure that they have somebody that they can talk to right away, not just that they have the option to onboard and upgrade on their own. So that was, it sounds obvious in retrospect, but it was definitely a journey for us to get there. And one of the other big things we learned is that often companies have PLG products because they sell something like, dev tools, right? Where that end user, a developer, really likes getting into the product. They really like using it themselves. They really don't want to talk to a salesperson. And it's great to have a very self-serve environment for them. So then when you've got somebody who swoops in trying to sell to them, but also trying to make their journey easy and help them onboard, they don't necessarily want to be sold to, but they absolutely, from their company size, they need someone to assist them through that process. So some of it is also, with Sprig, we sell to a lot of product managers and product teams, as well as some user researchers. And that's another population that doesn't necessarily love talking to a salesperson. So we definitely learned what are ways that we can offer that high touch engagement without requiring sales to talk to them. So we do offer, we now have a weekly product demo you can sign up for that's led by a sales engineer who's a great point of contact for that person. So there's no account executive on that weekly demo. There is just your engineer and product expert. And then also when our SDRs are reaching out, and you certainly see this in dev tool companies, often it's much more from a product expert perspective. How can I get you what you need? How can I help you with integrations? How can I, assist you in this process? And less, let me get you on a call. And there's certainly still, once one of those enterprise leads comes in through the free product, we're certainly still thinking, who at that company should we outbound to? How should sales get involved? But there's the acknowledgement that the right persona, even though we know we need a sales motion, the right persona may not be sales in terms of that approach.
Yeah. So you get a lot of free trials freemium in your PLG motion. You expect an ideal upsell or conversion path, but no matter what the product is, I think the sales assist necessity is dictated more by the size of the company that's signing up, more than
Yes.
the type of product you offer, right? So
Yes. Yeah,
I
unless
think,
unless you have a product where no one at any level could use it or figure it out on their own, which you may have, but if you have that, then PLG may be a challenge for you if you need individual hand holding at every stage. That does sound like more of a traditional enterprise sales.
yeah, makes perfect sense. Now, so one of the things I think about, Matt, is ops in a traditional, either just sales led or just product led motion by itself sounds like quite a bit of a nightmare, where you need to coordinate between multiple departments, get everybody on board, and it's very easy to get to drown in your day-to-day tactical asks from each one of these teams, to enable them to send them the right signals, to make sure that you're handing off leads at the right point, right? When it comes to PLG, with the kind of volumes that you're handling, and when it comes to layering on enterprise sales, it just sounds like a much bigger nightmare. So how do you make sure that RevOps remains a strategic role, and that you don't get buried in these tactical requests and pretty much miss the forest for the trees, right?
Yeah, good question. I mean, everyone in RevOps sees this. So one plus of the PLG volume is it does require you to be disciplined in ops, right? Those things where you send leads to a queue where some individual figures out who they get signed out to, right? That will never work at PLG volume, right? So you have to ensure that you've solved these volume-based questions to not get dragged into that. And you do also need to do all of the normal departmental navigating, like if you need a ticket system for requests, if you need to say we have weekly office hours, but SDRs really cannot individually chat RevOps outside of those office hours or outside of this shared channel. All the standard ways to handle volume internally. But in terms of being a strategic partner, one of the great things about a PLG motion is there's so much connecting data across systems and so much understanding that it really does require someone with a RevOps background to connect the dots. And if you're great at that role, you figure out ways to make it really visible and understandable to the rest of the company. So they're really seeing RevOps as this strategic source of insights. So that might be, setting up the right dashboards and reports, but then also doing, a weekly readout over Slack of the trends that you're seeing, the way the systems connect together. And also, I think a lot of it is figuring out how to be in the room earlier in projects or on more important projects. And what I've found is that in this PLG X enterprise sales motion, you can add a lot of value by, saying, hey, engineering, if you have this coming up, there's this complete downstream way that a change in, plan provisioning is going to affect the data that goes to sales and how product leads are routed, and when that comes up, and I have a good proposal on how to solve it, and I'd love to get to present it in this planning meeting, and vice versa for sales and so on. So if you're really the only person who can kind of see these implications across systems very far ahead and understand what they mean, a lot of that is just, again, being in RevOps, understanding the data structure, understanding when a change happens, how does the data structure change, and then how does it impact the go-to-market motion and the ultimately the experience of an end user, AE or SDR, or end user from the product perspective. And how does the team need to anticipate that? So being in that connecting proactive motion helps you stay having access to that early meetings.
Yeah, I think from what you're saying, one of the things that ops facilitates is also you're the dictionary between engineering and product usage, and how that translates to sales teams, right? Because 5 clicks on div ID 20463 might mean nothing to sales, but when the ops person is able to translate that to, hey, this is the activation moment, you need to now go talk to them about these, then it just makes a lot more sense. And ops defines the right moments for sales to reach out.
Exactly. And a lot of that is being prescriptive. Like in ops, I want to see all of the data. I want to see the raw data. And it often gives you this bias where you think, oh, I think that AE or SDR would want to see every single action the user takes in the product. And that is not true, right? I've been an SDR, I've hired SDRs, I've managed sales teams earlier in my career before I got into ops. And, you are so performance oriented toward your goal. You need a much narrower amount of information. And as a RevOps leader, it's very appropriate to decide what that information is in conjunction with your sales leadership. So a good example is with Sprig, we were building a pricing calculator where an end user was trying to figure out, if I upgrade, what would my price be based on all these different variables? What kinds of research am I doing? How many users am I sending it to? What platforms is it on? And so on. And the output of that was, of course, a number, which we obviously shared to sales so that they could be prepared for their sales call. But it was also a long string of every input, basically just comma separated. And it was absolutely not intelligible to a sales rep when they see this to be like, and what am I supposed to call them about? Written like half in engineering language and absolutely raw data. And we had to do a lot of translating to figure out, does the rep need every piece of information that went into the calculator? Probably not. What pieces do they need? What should they look like? What wording should be on them? And we ended up at a much, much more refined set of information that was, valuable to them in outreach and not just everything put in there. And by the way, in the chat, what is this term WFM? I would love to know.
Well, I'm gonna guess workforce management.
Oh, I see. I might turn that equation around a little bit. I'm not sure I would say sales ops equals all of those things, but I would say maybe go to market ops equals sales ops plus rev ops plus marketing ops plus workforce management. Absolutely. I do think that, I kind of use rev ops or go to market ops as a catch-all term here. But anyway, I think there is a lot of role for your opinion about what is going to be the most helpful and not just sending everything through. And also, it's less work to send through like, what are the 2 things people need to see in Salesforce as opposed to like every piece of data an end user has provided. That is too much work to maintain and too big of a system to keep running.
Agreed. So when it comes to this transformation, so clearly there's a lot of extracting data from the systems that track usage, quite a bit of transformation involved, and then a little more translation from system language to human language. Have you seen or used tools that you would recommend others to start with? Which ones are your favorite?
You're talking about in terms of getting PLG data in front of sales end users?
Yeah.
So I am really big on the idea that sales end users would like to be in sales-focused tools that they know and are familiar with. So even if, for example, I have lots of thoughts, and we'll chat about them for a minute, about how to get that product data into your CRM. Generally, I think that a reverse ETL tool is going to give you the most control and the most ability to keep your data constantly up to date, and really be able to do that not just on an individual user level, but on a team level and so on. So I really prefer reverse ETL over something like a segment event call in terms of sending data pieces over. I think sending events is also important if you're using them as triggers in some cases. But anyway, like obviously, I think the reverse ETL solution is great, and I would send it from the product database to the marketing automation platform where you can kind of orchestrate that before it shows up in Salesforce. But from a rep perspective, they would just like to see the end answer in Salesforce, or maybe they would like, one additional tool to see, more active usage. One tool like a Koala, for example, or Common Room, or many other signals related tools. But one thing I'm going to jump ahead to is, I know we're planning on talking about champion tracking and how it works in PLG. And I actually think it's a great example for this question. So in PLG, right, you've got all these free users, and then you've got paid users, right? So with normal champion tracking, you're only tracking your customers. So this is a tool like a UserGems or a Champify. When somebody who's a paying customer changes companies and goes to a new company, your tool would alert you that they're at this new company, and might kick off follow-up to you, or give you information to follow up with them. And if you're at a PLG company, suddenly the volume of users changing companies is so much higher, because you have all these free users, right? You're almost always going to have many more free users than you have paid users. And at a PLG company, you also typically have more paid users, because your product has more viral loops in it. So when you get a paid account, that account ends up with a lot more users in the account using the product than if you just had, your initial one, half department that signed up for it. So anyway, so in PLG Motion, you've got lots and lots of users that you can track, and you can run these champion campaigns off of them. And it's really valuable for the sales outreach that goes out to have all this information about how did the user use your product. Did they just sign up and never use it? Did they sign up and use a certain segment of the product? Did they sign up and become a paid user and then use like a whole suite? So if you're having your champions product, your UserGems or Champify or whatever, pass that granular data through, then on the sales end, again, sales may not want to see the exact details, but they do want you to put that person in the right campaign. So UserGems champion, former user high usage. They might not need to know how much they were using it, but they want them to be in the high usage outreach. Or UserGems, former user paid and product A in our product. And that's the outreach case. So again, in terms of favorite tooling, I think what I'm trying to show is, even if I might be a UserGems power user and in there all the time, what I ultimately am trying to do is get the sales team the most actionable, or ideally already actioned, already in the right campaign person, where sales has enough context, but they don't need to make all of those decisions for scratch if there's a system that can make those for them and save them time in their day.
Yeah, makes sense. So sometimes it might not just be a new tool, because I don't think any sales rep wants one more screen in front of them to go consume information. Just get all the information, translate it, and then send it to where they already live and breathe. And I think the champion tracking from a PLG activated user perspective is pretty interesting, because it's kind of common sense when it comes to an enterprise sales motion. But a lot of folks don't think about your free users who hit activation points in your freemium or free trial, and then will probably switch companies. They're already familiar with what your product does, and it's probably easier to sell to them, right? That's a great point.
Yeah.
So, Matt,
if I can say one more thing on the tool front, I will say, I know you're not asking for this, but I just have to say it. Revenue Hero is so terrific to work with. As an ops person who is used to having so many different flows of this user in this place trying to upgrade and talk to sales in this way, and it's, I know, and I'm sure everyone on the webinar knows, there's a lot of flow management in there and data in there, and it's really important that the right person ends up in the right router with the right rep using a tool like Revenue Hero, and Revenue Hero specifically, that has been so reliable, so easy to work with, such an incredible support team that seems to be on Slack literally 24/7 and answers my questions within 5 minutes, any hour of the day. Has just been so great. So I know you didn't ask for the shout out, but I just have to give it, because it's been such a joy to work with Revenue Hero.
I didn't ask it, but I'll take it. So, and Matt, you've been a great partner, and that's my not so great segue into partnerships in the PLG motion. So a lot of products think about partnerships differently, but I've heard from a lot of your conversations about how partnerships can be a great unlock, and how to think about it when you have a product, a PLG product, and can potentially partner with a bigger brand in the same motion, right? Could you talk through how a founder or a revenue leader should think about partnerships in the PLG motion?
Yes, yeah. So I think what's interesting about the PLG motion is your point of engaging with the lead is much higher in the funnel, right? They might be signing up for your product before they're ready to buy. So in the traditional traditional world of sales partnerships, we're thinking of like, we've got a partner, our products are extremely integrated, and we've decided to go to market together. So our sales team is going to like give their sales team a list and vice versa, and we're going to like call customers or prospects we know very well and kind of sell together in this very down funnel way. And it can be incredibly effective, but it's a very what I'd call heavyweight partnership. And because you've got to be directly trading lead lists and so on, the volume can be a little constrained. Now on the PLG side, the great thing is all we need to do to get someone to be entering our funnel is to sign up for our free product, which is a much lower bar to entry. And typically a lot of people are eligible for this. So if you're a smaller, earlier stage company with a PLG motion and you partner with a much larger company with much bigger brand share, you can drive an incredible volume of signups through that. And while not every signup there is going to be a potential for an enterprise deal, some of them absolutely will be, especially if you're picking the right partners that have the right markets. So with Sprig, one thing we found, because we did have a very successful inbound free sign-up motion, was that because of that, doing these lightweight partnerships, these marketing partnerships, where, yes, there was an integration, but was it the world's most detailed, mega enterprise sales together integration? No, it was not. But those were incredibly effective in driving leads. So a great example would be, if we were hosting an event at a conference with Mixpanel, or if we put, Figma's chief product officer's quote in our white paper or on our webinar, and Figma was sharing this, and the amazing, gigantic, incredibly engaged Figma audience was seeing it. And also they were seeing, yes, there is a Figma integration, and it is with Sprig, and it is free. And if you're a rabid Figma user that loves using Figma, because Figma's community is just so great and so engaged, or if you think of like the Notion community, right, so engaged, if it's that kind of user base and you have some relationship to them or some free, easy, super low lift integration, you can drive just so many leads through that. So anyway, I'm sharing this because this concept of this lightweight marketing partnership, PLG partnership, can be so effective for top of funnel lead gen in a targeted, right industry, right persona way, without doing all of this heavy lifting, lower volume, heavy sales partnership approach. So definitely PLG X enterprise sales lets you kind of have two partnership motions, or motions that are somewhere on the spectrum, and it's not just the one model that works.
Yeah, I think even if it's not going to lead to direct sales immediately, it sounds like an awesome distribution partnership, right? Like where you leverage a larger brand, put your name alongside theirs, and that just helps with visibility and distribution as well.
It helps a lot. Yeah.
Awesome. So Matt, I think this is one of the topics that keeps coming up when we speak to founders, folks who are thinking about adding on RevOps to their organizations. So the first thing that I would like to cover is, what should a founder think about or evaluate when they're looking for a RevOps consultant, not necessarily an in-house hire, because they want to get things started quickly. They don't want to go through the rigmarole of getting on a full-time RevOps hire. So given that you have both sides of that experience, what should a founder look for, and how would you approach it?
Yeah, great question. And it is hard to find the right RevOps consultant, the right RevOps in-house hire. It's, it's incredibly important to find someone who's going to be the right fit. So with founders, I mean, every company is different, right? Every company is in their own segment of the market with some kind of specific go-to-market motion, right? You might be PLG selling 20K deals. You might be PLG selling 100K deals. You might be pure enterprise sales, ABM, selling, $300,000 and up deals. You might be super transactional SMB, but with like a really high NRR. I don't know, but you've got a specific motion, and generally the best RevOps hire for you is not always going to be the person who's like super, super technical in system A, unless that's exactly what you need. But it's more the person who can really see your go-to-market motion, understand it, has seen it before, and can kind of proactively translate it into the right RevOps solutions without you needing to tell them what they are. So I found the best way to screen for this is when you have a first call with someone and you're telling them a bit about where your company is and what stage you're at and what you think you need help with. What I've found is that the great RevOps consultants, they just start jumping in. They're like, oh, that's so interesting. You haven't had RevOps in-house and you've got 5 sales reps. Oh my goodness, your deliverability must be like, in the absolute dumpster right now. What email validation are you using? Or, they might hear like, oh, that's so interesting. You've got PLG and you want to work on lead flow and routing downstream. What product data is getting into your system? Is it staying up to date? Is it coming in on the user level or the account level? Do your reps think it's good? Is it accurate? When you need to send an email, are they bugging your engineering team for CSVs? And if that person you're talking with just like knows the problem so far ahead of you that you're like, wow, they're psychic. This is a little weird. Did they already have access to my systems? If you're in that kind of call, like they are the right person and they are so worth whatever the rate is. And if it's more, there's someone who's a little more of an order taker, like, I mean, that's fine, but usually most people don't found companies because they're experts at RevOps. The founders of Revenue Hero might be an exception here, but most founders have, a great background in the thing that they're founding, and then they need RevOps to really take the lead and own that process. And I would look for that ownership and that psychic ability to know what the problems are on day one, 12 minutes into the call. If it's not showing up there, like it's not going to show up in 6 months.
So you're talking to somebody where the conversation feels like they know more about your business than you do, at least from our perspective. They're asking you questions that keep you up at night after that conversation. And you think, hey, I need to solve this problem yesterday, not after, right? So that's the right fit when it comes to who you're talking to, right? So let me flip the question then. How do you screen founders or companies where for a fact, because I'm sure we probably have listeners who are aspiring RevOps consultants. So how do you look for green flags when it comes to companies and who you want to work with?
Well, what's so great about working in RevOps, and tell me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I don't think I am, is if you work in RevOps, you see so much data, you report on so much data, and you end up getting very intuitive about like, I've heard these data points, I've heard the go-to-market motion is going this, and before I even like dig into my 6 Salesforce reports or whatever, I have a good sense that like we might have a win rate issue here, or we might, are we hitting our revenue goals? Or you might, have that sense and then go open the report and be like, whoa, like we are crushing pipeline, relative to all the pieces of information I have right now, things are really great. So you in RevOps probably have developed this spidey sense for intuitive data or incomplete data, but getting, a pretty good read on what the situation should be. And what's great is when you're screening founders and screening companies of like, should I work with them? You end up in your head pretty quickly at some picture of like, here's what I think their revenue or their lead flow or their pipeline or their ARR should look like. And even if these founders can't give you all the numbers, if the numbers that they are giving you on that early call are like, whoa, you're like, wow, they're they're outperforming in their category. They're doing better than some of my other clients. They've really solved something that other people haven't. Then that's that company that's so exciting to work with, and they really need you. And the other thing that I've found is a bit of a green flag is if the concern is a little less about like rates and hours and your working model, and the question is so much more like, we're trying to get this done and go to market. We're trying to launch this. We know nurtures are going to work there. How can you solve it from RevOps? And if it's this really builder conversation where they really value your skill set and they understand that you are the thing that is going to unlock the next stage for their business, who wouldn't want to be in that position and get to work from that great place. And then the last thing I'll say is if you end up back to the company valuing you and understanding that you can be valuable to them, if your counterpart is at a good place in the company, you're talking to a head of marketing, a head of sales, talking to a founder, talking to a COO, then that's a good sign that they really value RevOps, and you're going to get really interesting work and get the full picture. And if the person that is evaluating RevOps is like, the junior marketing assistant intern, then like probably you're not getting the full picture of the project, and maybe unless that conversation gets elevated, it may not be the right fit for some meaty, interesting strategic RevOps work.
So if you're talking to someone where most of your questions come back with, hey, I need to check that, I don't have access to that data, probably time to walk away.
Yeah. That's a good example of like, okay, well, me, the person working with them, is not going to get access either, and that's a little concerning.
Yeah, awesome. So that's one thing to look for, who to work with from a company perspective. I think the next natural thing that comes to my head is ops obviously is a lot of heavy lifting. You probably can't manage this as a one-man army, right? So when you hire folks to augment your team, either as a consultant or when you're running an ops function, what do you look for individuals who are a great fit for your team from an ops perspective?
Yeah, great question. Well, I've got three or four things that are like top of the list. So thing one, I'm sure there are great RevOps people who don't fit these categories, by the way. This is just who I work great with and who I have found works great. So thing one is someone who has owned a go-to-market number. So they've been an SDR, they've been a sales rep, they've worked in marketing, and they've owned a pipeline number. Like someone who has sweated and been responsible for that at some point in their career is much more likely to just have this intuitive empathy with the whole go-to-market team and just get it, and have that thing in their brain where they're constantly thinking, how can I make the numbers here higher? And I've found that motivator is really good to get people who are oriented toward the right go-to-market end goal. So that's thing one, former go-to-market staff. Thing two that I would say is I don't want carbon copies. If I just hire another myself, like that's nice, but like that just means I should have spent less time at the gym or something and like had more time in my day. And that doesn't add that much. So I always want someone with an additive skill set. Like they can be good at the same things as me, but there's got to be something where I'm like, I'll never be as good at them at SEO as they are. And that's great. So always an additive skill set that is really so far beyond what I am in some area. And then the last thing is clear written communication. I think especially in our remote environment, especially working with stakeholders across departments, or if you're consulting, working with clients at different companies, clear written communication is very important. And it also shows disciplined and organized thought. That is just, if you were organizing like a 200-step routing flow or something, you have to have incredibly disciplined thought and incredibly clear logic and incredibly clear models in your head to build that correctly in a system. And generally having that skill set often also results in very clear written communication, which again, also really, really helps communicate across departments and teams. So for me, those are the three big things.
Got it. So GTM background, so I understand the folks who you're going to be working with and setting up processes for. Somebody that you can learn something from is essentially a skew in a particular skill set, which helps you learn day to day. and clear written communication, and pretty much the ability to organize their thoughts and share it with others.
Yes.
Right?
And the best thing about clear written communication, I've seen this work amazingly with junior employees. If someone is a clear writer and you give them a sheet for self-coaching, they can do an amazing job getting to conclusions that before you had to spend half an hour talking with them on. Mm-hmm. So if the sheet is like, oh, you've reached what you think is a final solution for this problem and you're ready to send it to Matt for review. One, do you think the CMO would think this is the best solution? Why or why not? Two, what problems do you anticipate your solution might have? How did you address those? Three, let's imagine Matt is on vacation. Do you think Matt would think this is the right solution to the problem? What feedback would Matt give you if you were imagining it? What feedback would imagine some other mentor earlier in your career? What feedback would your former manager give you on the solution? And by the time someone who's a great written communicator and has organized thoughts has worked their way through those prompts, these junior employees can turn out really high level work if they can work through that. But it requires this, discipline of thought and writing to go through that process. So again, I've just found that in terms of managing and upskilling and so on, at least for my model of working, this written communication just pays huge, huge dividends.
So if you can't jump on a quick 15-minute call and can't explain what's going on, probably hard time in ops, right?
Exactly.
So I tend to get carried away in these conversations, but we have a few questions coming on. So I'm just going to quickly put one up on stage. So this comes up in any RevOps conversation that I have, right? Given how horizontal the role is and the number of things that you need to wrangle, how do you think about measuring the impact that RevOps has within an organization?
Yeah, great question. So I feel like there's kind of two approaches here. One of my current clients has a really great ROI calculator, and it's for they're a management training software, and their ROI calculator is all about things that I never even thought of, but it's really smart. It's like, employees who have a good relationship with their manager are 50% more engaged, and engaged employees are 23% more productive, and also engaged employees stay at a company twice as long. And by the way, the average employee's productivity is X dollar value, and the cost of recruiting an employee is Y. And through this, they have this great ROI calculator where I never thought you could assign a dollar value to management training, but they can in a really smart way. And I think if you wanted to build something like that for RevOps, you could say let's assume that without RevOps, we'd route 80% of our leads right, but 20% would be routed poorly or slowly. And then, if 20% are routed poorly or slowly, like in our business, what's the difference between responding to a lead day of and next day? And we probably have data on that. And then what's our ACV and so on. And you can end up at a dollar value very quickly. So if you're interested in ROI calculating, you can kind of break down components of your role. And just things like, well, if RevOps weren't here renegotiating all these vendor contracts, we'd be fine. We'd have all the vendors. We'd just, we'd spend, 10% more or 15% more or something. And, so you can break down every component of your role into a dollar value. So that's one idea. And for the most part, I haven't done this. I've only done it in some specific areas when I really needed to make a business case for look, I know you want me working over here, but if you don't have me lean in here, this will cost the company $1 million in terms of not cleaning up the way that this data syncs from here to there. So you can always come up with smart back of napkin ROI calculations. But I think the bigger thing is RevOps is really an enabling function, right? A company doesn't win or lose because they have great RevOps. They generally win or lose because, we sell more deals, we capture more of the market, we enable so-and-so. So if we're really thinking about it, it's more with great RevOps, sales can hit X% of their goal more, or the best sales reps would hit quota regardless, but this middle pack of sales reps might hit 10 or 20% more quota because RevOps has implemented projects A, B, and C of sending them better leads, like this champions program or this partnership program we talked about earlier. So I generally think it's kind of how did we impact the end dollars more.
All right. So at the end of the day, if you're able to tie it back to a business metric and show how you influence that business metric, great. But it needn't necessarily just be that, right? Because RevOps influences not just those numbers, but a lot of the intangibles as well, where you improve sales efficiency, a lot of things cost function. Awesome. So I think the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, Matt, was when it comes to measuring CAC, it's always interesting when you have a sales-led motion. I'm not sure how people approach it in a PLG motion, but I'm definitely not sure about how people approach it when it's a combination of both. So how should you think about CAC where you're working with a product-led growth motion layered on with the enterprise sales motion? Should you even be measuring it?
Yeah, so good question. So a lot of my PLG X enterprise sales experience was at Sprig, which was a relatively early stage organization while I was there. And because of that, it means, we didn't have these very built out, very mature, multiple team members just owning performance marketing, right? So in terms of being able to say, like, we spent, 10% more dollars on ads and we ended up with Y% more so-and-so, we were not yet at that stage as a company. And also with PLG and sales, it's an incredibly blended motion, right? Like you've got not just the whole process of someone signing up in the free product and using it and ending up upgrading and going to sales, but you've also got this totally different phenomenon, which is your PLG funnel being part of your marketing motion in a really different way. So when someone signs up as a free user, right, and they use your product and they, there's growth loops in there. So they end up sharing on social and then someone else joins your product, right? How are you going to attribute that? Like free user cost you money. They never paid, but then they did free marketing for you because you've got tons of free users that are doing tons of free marketing and giving you tons of virtually untrackable word of mouth advertising. That was a big part of Sprig's early success, is having so many free users that loved the product, that talked about us in lots of places and got us lots more free users. But it would be very hard to say, money spent to acquire group A that then eventually drove group B in an untrackable way. And we lost money on this group and we made money on this group, but the groups look essentially the same. So that would be really hard to split out. And also the way we talked about champions tracking is a good example. The partnerships campaign is a good example. So what I'm trying to say is the flows of costs and benefits are very, very blended across the product. And what it means is it's really hard to calculate CAC for these blended PLG and enterprise sales motions in a way that splits everything out neatly. So you kind of have to consider there's the cost of the core motion. And that's, your CAC includes a lot of things. It includes maybe your growth product manager. Normally they wouldn't be included in CAC. It certainly includes the whole marketing and sales team and, all of your marketing spend, et cetera. And it's hard to split it out by individual cohorts of users. So when you have a picture like that, you end up, in terms of optimizing it, you end up thinking a lot more, at least in my experience, about headcount and kind of what headcount is going to give us the best results here. And the outcome that I certainly think was true at Sprig was if you're hiring these ultra responsible individuals who just perform so far beyond their role, who are extremely cross-functional. So like Sprig had a very senior director of growth marketing, very senior director of partnerships, really great growth product leader. And all of those people were way beyond their role. That was CAC money very well spent, where we could have hired 3 or 4 junior employees that would have cost more, but certainly wouldn't have impacted the numbers more. And then, as you get larger, or, on top of your base core motion, just the cost of doing PLG, you can spend more on ads, and you can think about marginal CAC in terms of ad channels and so on. But the core cost of the motion and the cost of staffing the people running the marketing campaigns and, champions tracking and partnerships that are maintaining the core motion, that would be virtually impossible to cohort out or split out. And that's, at least in my experience, that is just something you accept to some degree. There is a core cost of choosing to run a really complicated go-to-market motion.
Yeah, I think if you think calculating CAC needs a blended approach in just a sales motion, it seems like just a different ballpark altogether when it comes to PLG and enterprise sales, right? Awesome. So I think we're near time. So Matt, one of the things I like to do towards the end of these conversations is, what are some of your favorite reads or references to learn more about how to layer on PLG and enterprise motions, or just to learn more about RevOps, PLG in specific? Just what is your weekend reading that the rest of the folks would benefit from, other than Leviathan, of course?
Oh, good question. I really enjoy being a little more of a first principles thinker. So I feel like I often learn a lot just by spending extra time looking through the company data and seeing what's actually happening, and if, my assumptions are right. I always learn a lot by grilling vendors on calls, talking to new startups about what they're building and why they see the space moving a certain direction. I always try to make time for those conversations in my week. I find that those founders often just have really good insights about, the direction that things are moving. And you always get tons of outreach from early stage founders who just want to run their idea by a RevOps person for feedback. And yes, it's kind of a sales pitch, but sometimes you can learn a lot on those calls. So I do that. I read Thomas Tungas's writing a good amount. I also read, who's the founder of CyberSign? I get his newsletter about data trends, and I find those interesting. And I guess, and I read Elena Verna, of course, in PLG and growth marketing. I think she's great. Emily Kramer. I'd say that's pretty much the list. And as you know, I have my my history reading and biographies reading over here.
That's awesome. So Matt, where can people find you?
Oh, great question. On LinkedIn, and let me find my link to put in here. But yeah, totally add me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat. Happy to stay in touch. Always enjoy connecting with others in the space.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks a lot for taking time to walk us through your journey at Sprig. I think other than Leviathan, there's a lot of notes that we're going to be taking around from this session. And one of the things that I keep forgetting to do at the end of these sessions is heads up, we have one more event in Masters of Revenue that's happening at the same day next week, where we have one more RevOps wizard joining us to talk us through his RevOps journey. Matt, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Have a good one.
Folks. Yeah, you too.